welcome you to an event we have been looking forward to here at DOE for some time now, the launch of the Communities LEAP program. I'm Shalonda Baker, the Deputy Director for Energy Justice and the Secretary's Advisor on Equity. The President has made historic commitments to frontline communities, environmental justice communities, and communities dependent on fossil fuels. I am so delighted to welcome the Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, to the stage to discuss how the Department of Energy is advancing the President's goals through a new departmental place-based initiative launched today. And so with that, please allow me to introduce Jennifer Granholm, our leader, to discuss the Communities LEAP program and to kick off our roundtable. Madam Secretary, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much, Shalonda, and hello, everybody. So let me just start by saying that if there's one thing you should know about me, I am totally obsessed with creating economic opportunity jobs in every pocket of the country. So when I was governor of Michigan, I was governor during the bankruptcies in the auto industry. And I looked into the eyes of too many workers who lost their jobs through no fault of their own as the global economy shifted. But President Obama, President Biden refused to leave them behind. We refused to leave them behind. So we decided we would we had built car 1.0, so we were going to embrace car 2.0, which was the electric vehicle. And that move helped our state to rebound and start creating jobs again, matching the same skills that the auto workers already had. So that experience, it really seared my soul, and it showed me how clean energy can grow our economy and lift people up, and especially in sometimes the hardest places, and sometimes with people who are the most, who have been at the back of the line and should be at the front. So I agreed to serve in this administration because I know President Biden sees this too. And it's why he's pushing for the Build Back Better agenda. And it's why he's pushing for 100% clean power sector by 2035, clean electricity. And as America's solutions agencies, which is what I like to call the Department of Energy, DOE is tasked with not only getting us there, but with making sure that everyone can participate, everyone can reap the benefits. It's really what today is all about. Clean energy is really a doorway to healthier, more prosperous, more equitable futures for communities across the country. Obviously, it reduces local air pollution, it improves health, it saves people money, it creates jobs, it boosts resilience, it slows down the impact of what we're seeing across the country with these extreme weather events. So it's a win-win, clearly, right? Not to use a trite phrase, but for too long, these doors have been really closed to so many Americans, these opportunities. So for too long, too often, low-income communities and communities of color don't see the benefits of clean energy in their neighborhoods. And too often, clean energy projects skip over the communities that really need them the most, from those who've carried the weight of energy extraction, fossil fuel extraction for decades, to those who are hit first and worst by the impacts of climate change, to those who have to spend way too much of their paycheck on energy just to live. So DOE is really committed to correcting these inequities. And today we're launching the entree to our bigger effort. Today's announcement is a $16 million Communities LEAP, or LEAP stands for Local Energy Action Program, to support community-driven, place-based clean energy solutions for local economic empowerment. This is, just to be clear, this is just the beginning of a beautiful partnership. What we want to do is to partner with up to 36 communities that are experiencing environmental injustice or climate impacts or economic stress from the shift away from fossil fuels. Communities also have to be experiencing high energy costs and have 30% or more of their residents that are low income. to be eligible for this. And we've taken steps to make applying as easy as possible, because we know the bureaucracy often is an impairment to people having access to benefits. So what we're doing is we're offering this broad solution set, including energy efficiency and carbon capture, renewable energy, clean transportation, critical minerals, clean manufacturing. And it's more than just a one-time engagement, to be clear. This is going to be a reciprocal long-term relationship. And I mentioned this is just the start. DOE brings financial resources and energy experts and communities, into communities, because communities then on their part bring knowledge, deep knowledge about local needs and assets and what would be good for them. So what we want to do is to meet each community wherever they are in their energy transition. And we want to help them, work with them to develop a locally driven clean energy action plan. And so after 12 to 18 months, each community will then be prepared to work with DOE long-term and to leverage more resources from the federal government and from philanthropy and from the private sector. So we want to be able to create this platform for engagement for resources across the spectrums that exist, that can be there to help communities, and often communities that are struggling don't have the resources themselves to figure out the doors to go through, or how to make these connections, or how to apply to what often is ridiculously bureaucratic process. So we want to be a partner and make it easy to be able to have this long-term relationship to access those resources. So this program is about putting communities in the driver's seat to determine the best solutions for meeting their own needs. It's about really investing in their success and creating good paying, durable jobs, which is my North Star along the way. And, as I've toured the country in this role, I've seen how community-based solutions are totally more effective and longer lasting than solutions that are imposed, right? When I was in Alaska, unique microgrid solutions that power remote Alaskan villages through harsh winters, we needed to work with them on those solutions and learn from them and be guided by them. The Sunset Park Marine Terminal in Brooklyn, they knew what they needed. They were developing the strategy. They're going to create offshore wind jobs in an underserved neighborhood. That kind of intel and that kind of partnership is critical to making this successful. So when communities take charge of their energy and economic planning, there's nothing that can stop us from achieving our bigger climate and energy goals. And that's why we couldn't be more excited about today's announcements. But as I say, it's only a down payment for the investments that DOE will continue to make in communities across America. And that's what President Biden's Build Back Better agenda is all about. So you don't have to take my word for it. We're going to go next to hear from some experts, community leaders who know what it takes to implement clean energy solutions in the places where it's most needed. So I want to thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to turn it back to Shalonda to say a few words and introduce the panelists as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Madam Secretary. I am absolutely fired up and just so thrilled to be a part of this roundtable. And so for those of you who have dialed in, you are in for a real treat. We have lined up an all-star lineup here today for today's discussion. These are people who know about place, who know about community-based economic development, and who know about working with communities to advance change. And so I want to start with Helen Chin, who is the president of Communities First, which is housed at Race Ford and Amalgamated Foundation, where she serves as a senior fellow. Under Helen's leadership, Communities First is transforming how federal, state, and local governments invest public dollars in low wealth and Black and Indigenous people of color communities, BIPOC communities, by implementing a relationships-first approach to community-driven solutions that centers frontline communities' leadership, innovation, and priorities. Helen is no stranger to broader communities. Prior to launching Communities First, Helen worked at the Cerna Foundation for 13 years as the program director for 6 years and program officer for sustainable environments at that foundation. She led the program's work to develop and support BIPOC and low-wealth communities in building accountability, alternatives, and democratic muscle to promote infrastructure development that simultaneously aims to achieve racial equity and economic, environmental, and climate justice. So welcome, Helen, to the stage. I next want to introduce former Mayor Michael Tubbs from the city of Stockton, California. Michael Tubbs is the special advisor to California Governor Gavin Newsom for economic mobility, and he is also the founder and chair of Mayors for a Guaranteed Income. Michael was elected mayor of Stockton in 2016 at just 26 years old. He was Stockton's first African-American mayor and the youngest mayor of any major American city in American history. As mayor, Tubbs was lauded for his leadership and innovation. He raised over $20 million to create Stockton Scholars, a universal scholar and mentorship program for Stockton students. Additionally, he piloted the first mayor-led guaranteed income pilot program in the country. He also created the Rise Stockton Initiative, transforming community environmental justice concerns into shovel-ready projects, which led to a $10.8 million award from the state of California. He helped to create California's Climate Action Corps and brought the first data center powered by water, Nautilus, to Stockton. He is a true rock star and has been named to too many institutes as a fellow that I can name here, but trust me, we're really excited to have him on the stage. I next want to introduce Sakita Grant, who is the Vice President of Programs at the Solutions Project. She oversees their grant-making, policy research, impact strategy, support for more than 100 frontline leaders, innovating and models for a regenerative economy. Sakita also works as a policy and impact strategy manager for the Emerson Collective, a philanthropic and investment collaborative. Sakita also worked at the Green Lining Institute as legal counsel for their environmental equity team after working as a policy advisor at the California Energy Commission in Sacramento. So welcome, Sakita. Next, I want to introduce Tatewi Means, Executive Director for Thunder Valley Community Development Corporation. Ms. Means is for the Sisseton and Wahpeton, Dakota, Oglala, Lakota, and Nkatoa nations. A longtime advocate for human rights survivors, children, and families, Ms. Means served as the Attorney General for the Oglala Sioux Tribe in the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota from 2012 to 2017. She has also served as a German Marshall Fund Marshall Memorial Fellow in 2015, and in 2018, she sought the Democratic nomination for South Dakota Attorney General, the first ever Indigenous woman to seek the office of a state attorney general in the United States. And as I mentioned, she's currently the executive director of Thunder Valley Community Development Corporation, an Indigenous nonprofit organization in the Pine Ridge Reservation, seeking liberation for Lakota people through lifeways, language, and spirituality. And finally, last but not least, I want to welcome Stephanie Tyree, the executive director of West Virginia Community Development Hub. She's a native of West Virginia, Charleston, West Virginia, and the executive director, as I mentioned, of the West Virginia Community Development Hub. And with nearly 15 years in policy, community development, and community organizing, she has dedicated her career to advancing community-based systemic solutions for rural coal-impacted communities in Central Appalachia. Her work has taken her from New York City to Mingo County, West Virginia, and many places in between. She is also a widely recognized fellow and someone who we're just delighted to have be a part of this conversation. And so with no further ado, I'll turn it over to the panel because I've spent enough time and I'm excited to hear this conversation. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much, Shalonda. And I want to perhaps start by talking about the specific sort of energy-related challenges and opportunities that may be identified or inherent to the communities that are experiencing them, which are all different. So maybe I can start with Tatewi, because honestly, I love the fact that you were running for Attorney General. Having been Attorney General myself, I hope that that's not your last effort. But Tatewi Means, what are some energy-related challenges that the Thunder Valley community has experienced and is addressing perhaps by creating new opportunities for community members, and maybe how are those challenges and opportunities maybe common across other Indigenous communities and communities of color?
Thank you. And it's such a pleasure to be here, an honor. I'm really humbled by the invitation and this opportunity to share a bit of our story here at Thunder Valley. As I said in the introduction, we are in the heart of the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation here in what is now South Dakota. We're one of 9 tribal nations representing, the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota nations. So I'm very honored to be here to tell a bit about our story. We have a 34-acre piece of property here that is actually constructing a regenerative community. But the beauty of our work really is centered on this holistic whole community approach that we do through 8 initiatives that really complement and work hand in hand with one another. So we can't take any one effort in isolation or in a silo, because we understand that in order to achieve climate justice, racial justice, all of the encompassing justices, we have to find balance, right? There's so much talk about power shifting strategies, but what we really strive for here in our liberation journey is seeking a balance. And one of our struggles is because we're so rural, we have 2.5 million acres here on the Pine Ridge Reservation. So we're a large land-based Indigenous tribe, about 33,000 residents, but extremely rural, and have some economic challenges as a whole community. And so one of the things that we have come to know is that there's a lack of competition in rural areas, and especially for Indigenous communities in the energy market. Lone providers and producers, they control large regions of the state, and so there's no incentive for them to innovate or provide high quality service. The state that we live in, that we are, a part of, South Dakota, they disincentivize the production and use of green energy, including very low buyback rates for power return to the grid. And there's actually a proposed tariff that's going before the state legislature now that would do behind the meter taxes on energy production. So actually paying an extra penalty for producing clean energy back to the grid. Some other issues that we notice is that high pricing for community members. Connection and kilowatt hour charges are higher because of the lower population, but our wages are low. The average income is just around $11,000 a year for most of our families, and they're supporting households of 15 to 20 people in one household. So you'll have energy bills that are upwards of $500, $600 a month, and so people really have to make trade-offs for livability. Do I pay electricity, or do I pay propane so I can have heat this winter? And so it's really substandard conditions, and it's definitely survival based. Some of the things we're doing to address these, though, for community members, obviously, is the construction of our regenerative community, building a community from the grassroots, from the ground up, from below ground up, right? Infrastructure included. That's unlike any that our community has seen. A lot of the communities that you see in Indigenous communities come up around anchor institutions, schools, Bureau of Indian Affairs offices. And so this is designed by and for the community. We have energy efficient building. We're a net zero. We have net zero aspirations. So we'll produce all of the energy that we use here on our 34 acres. Our homes have a HERS rating of 20 with, very conscious about the R value of our walls and roofs so that they can withstand extreme weather conditions. Like I mentioned, we do a whole community approach. And so we pull in our social enterprise initiative, which is really aimed at building community wealth, but from a Lakota perspective, and our workforce development, so that we're training the next line of liberated workforce to really engage in these opportunities about clean energy development and construction. And I definitely think some of these issues, most of them are common across rural and Indigenous communities. We are really at the hands of these lone energy providers. And so, some of our needs are really patient and comprehensive capital that are willing to invest in the best and most innovative technologies, because it's so expensive to build in that way. But thank you for the question.
Well, thank you so much, and we're lucky to have you for sure. And let me jump over to a different community, West Virginia. Stephanie Tyree, as we transition as a nation to clean energy, maybe you can say a word about the specific barriers to economic empowerment for communities that really have been historically dependent on fossil fuels. Like, what do you see as the greatest opportunities for new investment in those communities?
Sure. And thank you so much for including me here today. I agree. It's a real honor to be included. I appreciate being able to represent West Virginia and just the greater Appalachian region. There are unique challenges to communities, fossil fuel dependent communities across the country, but there are also a lot of similarities. So it's really exciting to be in this conversation where we're getting connected to each other. My organization, the West Virginia Community Development Hub, works on the ground with rural West Virginia communities all across the state. We're working primarily with communities that have populations between 1,000 to 15,000. So we're really working with very rural, highly distressed communities that are trying to figure out how we transition to a new economy. And it's been amazing to work in the field of community economic development in West Virginia for the last decade, because there's been a massive shift in the way that community members and community leaders are even thinking about energy and energy transition. When I started working in this field 10 years ago, there was a war on coal happening in West Virginia. And it was really looking at how do we save the coal industry, because that was seen as the primary economic driver of the state. And if the industry failed, the state would fail. And there's been a major shift in the understanding that we can still be an energy leading state while embracing new energy opportunities and energy transitions, and looking entrepreneurially at how to grow our economy in the state. So the conversation that I see happening now in rural communities around West Virginia is transition is happening around the country and around the world, and transition has come to the coal fields. We have to participate or we'll get left behind. So how do we build a new economy for ourselves? There are real barriers to us moving this work forward. And I'm thrilled to learn about the Community LEAP program, because I think it will bring some of the critical resources that we need to rural communities. But I want to give a couple of examples of some of those barriers. So in highly distressed, extremely impoverished communities, the challenges of poverty are so extreme that it can be hard to move forward community building and community economic development strategies. The population is low, the capacity is low, and the foundation of security and stability that's needed to do this work is just not present for many residents. So we have to lean on organizations and intermediaries that can support those rural communities. The other challenge that we see is there are really broken markets in rural communities. So we look through our work at redeveloping main streets and building revitalized communities that are going to attract new businesses, retain and attract new workers. And it's really difficult to build rural communities that don't have the economic base to support a lot of local businesses and don't have the access to infrastructure and investment for redevelopment. So we have to think really creatively about how to bring in resources to drive forward development in places where the money doesn't flow easily, right? So, and then there are all of the challenges that you hear about all the time with West Virginia and with high poverty communities, including our population decline, health challenges, and substance abuse. But everything that I see every day is inspirational despite these barriers. So everyone that I see working in West Virginia is working here to improve the state because they're deeply committed to the state. And we're all pushing ourselves to think so creatively about how we fix these broken systems. And all around me and all of the work, I see a culture of entrepreneurship. And when I say that, I mean entrepreneurial thinking and entrepreneurial approaches to building new strategies. And solutions, as you said, Secretary, have to come from the ground up. Top-down strategies do not work in rural communities. First of all, those strategies are often not even trickling down to the most highly distressed, high-need communities. If you're working in the top 4 or 5 largest communities in West Virginia, you're not going to impact 3/4 of the population. You really have to figure out how to build pathways that are going to get down to the really small communities and the ones that are the most highly distressed, where people live and they're going to keep living. And there's a real opportunity to revitalize and develop them. Secondly, I think in terms of opportunities, the economic and workforce development strategies have to be aligned with community development. Vibrant communities and community-based services like childcare, access to healthy foods, are what make or break decisions about whether to locate a business in a community and whether people will want to move to a community. We're in an economy that has huge choices in terms of where businesses and people locate, and they want to locate in places where they want to live and where their workers will have the services that they need to be able to do their jobs. So that's another key strategy that we have to look at, is how do we build vibrant communities in order to drive workforce development and economic development. And finally, we need access to investments that's going to drive forward the development of those mid-range businesses, right? So we know, and it's been very interesting to see the shift in the understanding of the state, that the large 100+ employers are not going to be the only answer to our revitalization and redevelopment. But we also have to have employers that are employing more than 1 or 2 people. So that, I think, is the big challenge for us, and where there is real opportunity with building a clean energy economy in the state that I'm very excited to see move forward. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. First of all, thank you for your optimism. That's really exciting. Number 2, if we are able to get this legislative package through Congress, where there will be a huge emphasis, for example, on supply chains, where a lot of those mid-sized businesses come in, we just have to make sure that we are encouraging and incentivizing them to locate in the right communities, right? And so it's exciting to be able to contemplate what this legislative package might be able to bring for communities as well. And by the way, you happen to have the benefit of living in a totally beautiful place. So that's the quality of life issue in terms of your physical surroundings is very exciting.
I agree.
All right, you bet, yes. Sakita Grant, so you've been working with the Solutions Project and the Justice 40 Accelerator. And so I'm wondering how you recommend we support frontline leaders for the long term. I mean, how can we ensure that our investments go to the right people and places, and make sure that we build this reciprocal relationship, and an effective relationship? Bottom line is, how can DOE be a partner to frontline communities in the best possible way?
Yes, thank you so much for the question, for the invitation, and the opening remarks, Secretary Granholm and Deputy Director Baker, that really, I think, set the tone. And to the panelists, I'm inspired and really kind of feeling energized by what I'm hearing already. So one of the biggest takeaways of the Solutions Project, as a philanthropic funder and through the Justice 40 Accelerator, which I'll talk a little bit more about, is the importance of listening to and following the leadership of grassroots communities most impacted by the issues we are trying to solve. And this is, I think, a theme that you've initiated, Secretary Granholm. We've heard through all the panelists who have spoken. So through the Justice 40 Accelerator specifically, which is a program that provides capacity building, technical assistance, direct funding, and other incubation support for grassroots-led climate and clean energy projects that are interested in drawing down on the federal Justice 40 initiative dollars. We're learning through an inaugural cohort, which has 52 projects. And I'll note, there were over 300 applicants and phenomenal projects that came through. So this is really an oversubscribed opportunity. But we are learning from those projects about the breadth and depth of solutions in the clean energy and climate space that are actually ready right now for the right types of investments. At the Solutions Project, we have the honor of learning from and supporting around 100 grantee partners across the United States and Puerto Rico about and learning about these phenomenal localized energy solutions. And a few examples, in California, we were learning from the Local Clean Energy Alliance, Reclaim Our Power, and other grassroots formations that are working tirelessly to break down archaic energy models and monopolies, and really thinking about how we seed forward more democratically and locally controlled clean energy resources, much of which I think this LEAP program is something that can really support. In addition, if we look at to Iowa, working with the Winneshiek Energy District, who has been really innovating around clean energy districts. So these are phenomenal opportunities for public and private partnership and investments to help bring about, again, those local clean energy resources. Also giving a nod to the work happening in Puerto Rico, Queremos Sol and other formations that are thinking about and ready to implement more sustainable and climate safe energy systems, and not going back and investing in failing large fossil fuel dependent infrastructure that the community doesn't want in their communities anymore. I think Secretary Granholm, you mentioned Uprose and Sunset Park and the working waterfront there that's bringing forward wind energy, and Tetewi being on the panel to talk about Thunder Valley CDC's work is phenomenal, and the list goes on. A few things I want to note about what we're learning in our practice of really kind of following the lead of frontline grassroots leaders in this space is that, one, the projects are there. There are undoubtedly thousands of projects that can help us meet our climate goals that we need in order to meet our climate goals, but just need the support of public, private, and philanthropic dollars. So sometimes when I hear folks say that, localized and smaller scale can't get us to our goals, they're necessary to get us to our goals. Localized and small scale projects have big impact collectively, and with the right resources will scale and are necessary to get us to our climate and clean energy goals. The other thread that we hear a lot is around climate resilience. And so when you hear about these localized models and these innovative models that grassroots communities are bringing, there's a really important part around climate resilience. We've just this year, from the winter infrastructure failures in Texas and other places of the South to, Ida and the impacts there in New York and Louisiana and other places to the wildfires, we are seeing in the Midwest and the West, we are seeing where centralized infrastructure is really failing us and costing lives. And how do we really shift into more climate safe and localized clean energy resources? And that is something, that needs to happen now, which is kind of the last point that we hear quite a bit, is about there's so much urgency that is around this topic that we need to move policies like LEAP and others to be able to actually see implementation of the vision that we collectively have. So not just stopping at the policy, but the actual implementation and making sure that we see through the intended impacts. So I'll stop there, but looking forward to learning from others on what else is cooking.
Sakita, so glad to hear from you. We really we appreciate the opportunity to learn from you, since you have been doing this and designing this in a way that allows us to build on what you are doing. As you say, you were oversubscribed. There is so much need out there. I'm really excited that we're going to be able to sort of pick up the thread that you have started. So excited about that. Thanks so much for joining us. Let me move over to ex-mayor, always mayor, Michael Tubbs. You've just been such a rock star. I'm so glad that you joined us today. And I'm wondering, can you talk about what you learned as mayor of Stockton about the benefits of investing directly in communities or individuals as a strategy for economic empowerment? From your perspective, what does it mean for communities to be in the driver's seat of their own decision making?
Well, first, let me just thank you, Madam Secretary, for your leadership and for even having this conversation. And I especially appreciate the emphasis on this being a down payment, understanding that $16+ million is some money, but given the scale of problems and the centuries of policy that got us to this point, know that we have to do more. And I'll also say I'm happy to go after Sakita, because a lot of what I've learned came from bringing in outside people outside of government, like Sakita, to spend the time necessary to build community capacity and listen, to help translate what the community was seeing and feeling to sort of government policy and action. And I think what's exciting about the premise of the question is a realization that the communities and the people aren't the problem, but they are actually the solution. I'll say that again. It's just a realization that the people in these communities and the communities themselves are at the intersections of poverty, of lack of opportunity, of all the ills, it's not the fault of the people who happen to live in those communities. And when you speak to listening and putting community in the driver's seat, it's just a realization that they're actually assets and solutions. And in Stockton, I learned so much. I learned, first of all, the importance of trees, right? Because I'm not a scientist, but I remember one of my earliest community sessions, I was talking about these economic projects and these things I was excited about. And the grandmothers were like, we just want to be able to sit in the shade. And I was like, okay, we could plant some trees, but what about this economic development project? What about this? But then after we crunched the data, Secretary, we found out that folks just weren't talking. That in fact, in that community, it was 3 to 5 degrees hotter than other parts of the city, precisely because of the lack of trees. That the community had a higher rate of asthma than other parts of the city, precisely because the lack of trees. And it was time after time, little community insights that really put, I think, the data in perspective and really reminded us all that we're talking about the lives of people. And I think the other thing that was exciting for me was seeing when we connected it to economic development, when we talked about sort of the opportunities and with entrepreneurship, some of the opportunities in sort of green economy, when we talked about electrifying our buses and making them all electric, when we talked about those things, the community got excited because it translated what they saw as pain points but translate to this climate conversation that oftentimes people felt really disconnected from, as if it wasn't speaking to them and their lived reality. So to punctuate all that, I would say you can't do this and you can't do this well without listening to community, because we've seen what happens when we don't listen. We get the world as we have it. We get the issues that we see. So I'm excited that we're all being humble and saying, you know what, we have a lot of the tools, but we don't have all the answers as governments, as institutions. But if we share the tools and the resources with the community, then we can co-create solutions that are localized, but can also be taken to scale.
Awesome. Awesome. And the Governor Newsom, congratulations. You're going to still be in your job, which is great. So glad that worked out for all concerned. He's fortunate to have you, though. Thank you so much for your perspective and your passion and your wisdom. So we look forward to continuing to partner and to learn from you as well. So thank you. Let me jump over to Helen Chin. So Helen, I know you're an expert in justice philanthropy, and you've transitioned from philanthropy to actually lead the Communities First initiative. And while we're dedicating new federal funding to this particular effort, and we know we've got to partner across different sectors to get it done. And so what advice do you have for us on how DOE can think about how we partner with private sector, philanthropic sector to sustain our engagement with community awardees through LEAP, so they can have, the most support possible for achieving their clean energy goals? Are you there?
I am here. Thank you so much. Thank you, Secretary, for the invitation to join the launch of the LEAD program. At Communities First, we are committed to the integrated role that the public sector, the private sector, as well as the philanthropic sector can play to support community-driven solutions that center their leadership, their expertise, and their ability to define the priorities that are actually going to help their communities thrive. The LEAD program creates amazing opportunity for DOT, not just to partner with local communities and jurisdictions, but also philanthropy and the private sector. Philanthropy and the private sector, as we think about them, especially the folks who have been doing a lot of impact investments and have been working in service of communities, they have been supporting a lot of the community-driven solutions that we're looking to figure out how to galvanize. Whether those plans or that seeding of capital has happened in places like Spartanburg, South Carolina, or Richmond, California, or Buffalo, New York, or my hometown, which I appreciate all the shout outs to Brooklyn. Totally love that. We've been seeding a lot of great opportunities, and that's been in part to the work that philanthropy and the private sector have been able to put resources to. But the thing that we must acknowledge is that historically, DOT does not work directly with cities or in place. And philanthropy can support that relationship building that will be necessary, not only just to support the plans, but also the implementation that will be critical around creating clean energy solutions. These relationships cannot be understated, as many of the other panelists have talked about. The most impacted communities, excuse me one second, the relationship cannot be understated. I want to say that because the most impacted communities who have the expertise and the wisdom of what their communities can create, they don't have the access and the resources to many of the things that they want to be able to do. And these relationships are going to be critical because of this lack of access. So in the short term, communities can lean on their relationship with philanthropy in order to be a bridge to being able to build these relationships. In addition, what many of the panelists talked about so eloquently is that philanthropy can support a lot of the integrated planning that is going to be needed. We talked about the need to be able to move forward and for DOT to be able to build relationships. The challenge is that many of these communities do not live single issue lives. So while they may be focused and while we may be focused on the clean economy, as you noted earlier, the clean economy actually is a bridge to being able to build on other things, whether it's around the climate concerns that that community has, whether it's around economic disinvestment that those communities are having. So the question is, can we think in a more integrated way? Philanthropy can actually play that role in being able to support the integrative framework that will be necessary for communities to build upon this effort that you've been able to put forward. The other thing that communities will be able to lean on philanthropy as we think about the role that they can play is being able to support the community institutions that are rooted, the community anchored institutions that are playing that support role that we see is going to be critical toward the implementation. Many of the communities are relying on intermediaries to play the support that is necessary. But the challenge is that many of those communities lack the capacity to be able to do this. So in order for us to get to the goal around decarbonization, it will be critical for philanthropy to partner with the public sector, with organizations such as yours, agencies such as yours, in order to build out the necessary capacity for these groups to be able to fulfill the commitment that they've decided that they're ready to embark on.
Amazing, amazing brilliance. Thank you all so much. I mean, first of all, I know our team is on taking notes about all of the advice that you have been so gracious in providing for us. I want to thank every one of these panelists for being here and for the leadership, what you're doing when you're not on this screen. You are teaching us how it's done, but you are actually doing it out there. So I really want to thank you for that. And we will continue to partner with you as, as I noted, this is just the start of our place-based strategy. And we are excited to launch Communities Leap today, but you're going to hear back from us more. I just want to acknowledge that for more information, because if you're listening from a community, we want you to be able to apply. So in the chat, we have put the website where you can find out more information. That's www, I just want to make sure that I get this right, www.energy.gov/communities-leap/communities-leap. So look in the chat to make sure you get it right. And we want you to be able to access it and apply. And we want to be able to partner bottom up with communities across the country to achieve our energy goals writ large, but also to make sure that every community has access to this opportunity. So I want to thank you all. Shalonda, I want to thank you for your great leadership, Shalonda Baker and Kate Gordon, who is also leading our place-based efforts. And everybody, thank you so much for joining us on this day, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thanks, everyone.